Trek favorites. What are yours? Welcome to Trek Favorites. I'm Chuck Joyner, and this is the show where you get to hear from some of my tech friends and my Trek friends about some of their favorite episodes of Star Trek. The idea is to find out what makes it one of their Trek favorites. Once in a while, folks, you get a guest who just has the tech chops and just can't resist showing them off, and that's the case here. We have Mr. Ewen Rankin from the British Tech Network on. Ewen, great to see you. Nice set. Nice set.
Jesus, man, that's a hell of a build-up. Yeah, no, I thought I'd make an effort.
I like it. I like it a lot.
This is actually the Starship. The Starship Enterprise is really out there, you know. It's the truth.
And you're sitting right
yeah, they gave me a lift, so yeah.
Not surprising. If there's anybody that could conjure it up, it would be you. No question about it.
Well, I did have a lovely picture of you here, but you made me take it down, so.
Yes, I did. That was just disturbing the whole way around. I
thought you looked like a bridge captain. I thought you totally pulled it off, but.
I don't know. Alien spaceship captain, maybe. I'm not sure.
Oh, wait. Give me a few minutes in Photoshop.
Oh, no.
By the next time we have you on the Mac show, mate.
Oh, that'll be scary. You and I was really intrigued. You picked season 3, episode 20, Tin Man, which is the one where the Enterprise encounters an alien life form, Gum-2, and there are questions over its destruction or its impending destruction and all that. And I have to tell you, this is one that I didn't see coming. I didn't think that this would be this or picked this early. What is it about this one that hits you?
Well, to a certain degree, because we had the conversation about Darmok and Janard at Tanagra, and you said, "Nat gone." And it was because that was a very big seminal episode. There was an awful lot of people would have gone for that, and I thought people would go for, the very last episode. I thought someone would go for something with Q, because they were the obvious ones, so they were favourites, and they were my favourites. But I sat and thought, well, do I want one that's my favourite that I can sit and jolly through, or do I want something that actually meant something to me, and that probably means something now as well? So that's why I picked this episode, because. Was it my favourite? At the time, no, and I'll tell you why a bit later on. But it meant something, a great deal to me at the time. And it also, I think if you look back now and you look at the kind of, especially with the idea of the fact that Tin Man became a single entity with its crew at some point, and the thing was living. I think that's what we defined as life in science terms has changed, and what we've defined in terms of how we interact with computers or with machines is changing rapidly in the modern environment as well.
Okay, so that's interesting, especially your comments about the definition of life and how we define it now versus maybe how we define it then. My personal definition would be something maybe, but there you go. I was going to say self-awareness, but something can be alive without necessarily being self-aware, which the alien entity obviously was. So,
yeah, but I mean, if you look at things like a virus, I know it's not technically alive in that sense because it's a collection of proteins, but it seems to know what it's doing. It seems to have a plan, if you like, of reproduction, not reproduction because that's the wrong word because that'll define it as an organism, but there seems to be a pattern for its existence and a process of its evolution. And I think we get very defined in our own ideas about what we think life is and when it is. And I'm not going to get into a pro-abortion or anything like that conversation. I just think that there's, we're only in the bounds of our own solar system. We haven't got past the moon yet in terms of analysing soil samples and that kind of stuff properly. So what we find as life and what can live and what can thrive on what we define it as is probably not even close to being true.
Fair point. And when I went back and watched this, I have to admit, as I go back and watch really intently, there's so many different messages here, I guess, about almost the right to life, the right to define your existence or use your existence as you wish, which is what Tam ended up doing. It seemed like everyone was trying to save him from himself, and instead he really needed or wanted to go and do this, and that's what he ended up doing.
Well, I think the first thing with the Tam Elrond calendar is that the character is that he's someone who clearly doesn't fit in, and I think there's probably an awful lot of people who are around the tech community who deep down at a certain point in their lives, particularly as children, probably felt that they didn't fit in. They found, you look at the autism element that's kind of hinted at within that, and that is something that definitely sets children apart in school and can then set them apart in later life and adulthood. I know a few friends, and I've got experience of Asperger's myself with people, and those people are challenging characters to get on with, and when you do get on with them, you find real gems of human beings. But if you don't get on with them, you just don't get on with them. We got a spread in the UK called Marmite, which you put on your toast, and their advertising campaign is you either love it or you hate it, and you do. There is no middle ground. No one goes, well, it's all right. They just say, oh, I love it or I really hate it. And I think there's a thing in that character as well that kind of comes through as that, because he's quite, I watched him and I didn't really take to him. He became quite I didn't bond with him on an emotional level when I first saw it, but I see far more in it now that I'm older. And I don't know whether he was played well because he became this divisive character that clearly Deanna loved and had time for and empathy for, versus someone that Riker clearly had no time for. And Picard struggled to see the middle ground between the two. And there's an awful lot that goes on in Star Trek that is about understanding and empathizing with people, and also then this idea of what constitutes a life form and what constitutes good and bad behavior.
That's a really interesting point you made about between Deanna, Riker, and Picard. They each had their own reactions to Tam. Deanna clearly was still in that, I think, in the caregiver mode, because early on in the episode, she said he had been one of her patients.
That's probably the worst piece of exposition there's ever been in a Star Trek episode, because it's like Tam Elrond, what, the guy that caused the thing? Says Riker, clearly showing contempt for him, and then Picard later on saying, so he was a colleague? No, he was a patient. And it's like, it's an exposition that's got to be there, but it's just the worst delivered piece of exposition ever.
Yeah, but I guess you're right. It kind of set things up in a very, very quick fashion so they could get on with the story.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, Riker was borderline rude at times. Of course, Tam was kind of rude in his own way, for reading everyone's mind and talking ahead of them, which that has to be an unsettling experience. It's even unsettling when someone that you're conversing with talks ahead of you. They already have figured out what you're going to say and keep on going, let alone knowing that they could actually read your mind and know what's there.
I think that was one of the strengths of Next Generation. I mean, Next Generation was my era. I came home from school and started watching it, or I came home from work and started watching it Tuesday night, 6 p.m. every single week. And I recorded them and then watched them back. But I think that was a good dynamic of Star Trek, was that you had Picard, who was the measured, thoughtful one, clearly with great experience. And then he would make the bullets that Riker would fire, or he would just get Riker to keep everyone else in order so he didn't have to deal with it, which is kind of, I guess, the way that a first officer works on a proper ship. Not that I've ever worked on one, but that's my perception of it. And then Deanna was this thing that was supposed to be about advising Picard on what other people were thinking so he could put a far better response in. Because the number of times that we get into, I just think, like driving your car, you get some guy cuts you up, so you honk your horn, so you're mad at them, and then you realise they're utterly lost, they're arguing with their wife, they've had a bad day, none of that actually interacts with you, none of that's something that you think about. And that was the role of Diana, to say, hang on, this Romulan's just got out of bed the wrong side, mate, just calm down a bit.
Yeah, and I did want to mention, you at one point had sent me some Marmite, and I tried it, and holy cow! I'm sorry, but I fall in the category of the people that couldn't stomach it.
I think I think if you get it as a kid, so like I used to get it on bread, so it'd be bread and butter and then a smear of Marmite on it. And God, and if you have something like scrambled eggs, so you get scrambled eggs, you bake a piece of toast, you put a smear of Marmite underneath it, and then you put the scrambled egg on top. Man, that is heaven. Heaven right there. But how much did you use? Did you use the whole pot on like one piece of bread?
Oh no! I just sampled it, and it was nasty. It was. What is it? Is it a vegetable product? I don't even know what.
No, it's yeast.
It's yeast.
It's the byproduct of brewing here in the UK.
Oh, okay. Well,
the Aussies have got a similar product, which is similar but doesn't taste quite as nice to my palate because I've been brought up on Marmite. But that's called Vegemite, and it's just a yeast spread. I'm sure they must have a yeast spread somewhere in the States.
Oh, they probably do, and I think your point is well taken. You grew up on it, so
yeah,
we all have those acquired tastes from our youth. I was really intrigued with the Romulan presence here. I felt like it was never exactly stated, what they were trying to achieve. Were they trying to kill Gum-2, or were they trying to be the first ones to establish contact with the idea of turning it into a weapon?
I think that kind of added an imperative to it because it was an arms race parody of the classic 90s East versus West. So, they were, and I thought there was a great line as well from Picard where it says to Tam Elrond that it doesn't necessarily help to be the first to something, and then the ship gets destroyed because he stands back from it, and Elrond warns him. And I thought that was a good point there that, we spend a lot of time trying to be first at everything. And sometimes it's not always the right thing to be first. And certainly in tech buying terms, how often do we rush to the first gen product and regret later that we didn't wait for version 2 or 10.13.1 instead or something like that?
Well, and not to take us off too much in the tech area, but how many times have we said on both our shows that Apple isn't always necessarily first to the game, but they just do it better? They come in and take a market.
Yeah, let others make the mistakes first and then come in and kill the market. I think that's a fair point. So there you go. That was it. Yeah.
Yeah. How did you feel? Well, you mentioned that a lot of people you think in the tech community probably have that feeling of not belonging. And I think that's probably true. It's absolutely true. But I also think it's true of just kids in general, people in general, that at some point in your life, you're in situations, and often in a younger setting, where you just don't belong. You don't have anyone that seems to understand you or is like you or appreciates you. Is that one of the things you think that is the real message here, that you can be that person and still have a purpose?
I think there's a fine line, certainly when you get into the creative fields, of someone who is different for the sake of being different, someone who is different because they're a groundbreaker, and someone who is actually a groundbreaker but never gets the recognition for it until far later. And I think painters and composers and things like that are a classic one, where they fight and fight and fight for their technique, their art, that kind of stuff, and they're never really recognised till after they're gone. And I think there's a bit in that with some of the people that I know. As a creative, you're trying to do something that's different and outside the box, and makes people take note, when actually most people don't like change, so they don't want to change. So unless you're producing something traditional, they're not interested in buying it from you. And it's horrible to strike a line where you've got to do something where you're got to pay the mortgage first, but you can't do anything that's outside the realms of the norm. I got asked a few years ago, when was the last time I took a picture for enjoyment, and I had to seriously think. I couldn't remember, because I'm getting paid to take pictures of technology and industry so that they can stick it in a brochure. And 9 times out of 10, that's a fairly similar shot. Because if you go somewhere that's a little bit too wild and out there, then multi-million-pound businesses want tradition far more than they want stuff that's cutting edge.
That's a fair point. That's a fair point. One of the great moment I thought was when Tam first materialized in the transporter room and stepped down and was talking to everyone there, and then Data said something and he spun around like he was completely surprised, And as a telepath, this is something that obviously didn't happen to him very often. He doesn't get surprised. And then Data later says, that, okay, Deanna may understand him better, but Data said that I think, basically I get along with him better, or he appreciates me or understands me better.
The thing that I pulled as a parallel there was maybe someone who was blind, because Tam, his whole outlook on the world is to listen to the voices around him, and he probably reacts auditorily to where the voices are coming from in his brain rather than actually physically looking at things, which is why he doesn't even recognize Data's there. Data might as well be just a pillar in the column that's holding up the transporter room, and that's why it shocked him so much when he heard a physical voice come out of something that he hadn't even recognized visually. I think that showed the kind of depth of how immersed he was in the telepath world, and the fact that Deanna makes a comment later on that he can basically hear absolutely everyone on the planet, and he can't shut them out, and he finds it really hard to shut them out. And then there was another line that she said later on where it was, I can't remember if Beverly said it, but it was about how one person will take a stimulus and hold it together when someone else with the same stimulus will go under. And I thought that was kind of, there's a definite strength of character in people. And I think there's a dividing line between people who recognize that they can take certain stimulus and then discard the ones that aren't important to them. And then there's others who do it through stupidity. And then there's others who just have so much stimulus in their life that they find it incredibly difficult to concentrate and how to actually focus it into a function that will actually produce something at the end of it. I think that's what Tam struggles with.
You mentioned Alzheimer's. Excuse me, not Alzheimer's.
Asperger's.
You mentioned that earlier, and I don't understand that completely. I have not had much experience in those areas, but it does seem like that it's a hyper-focus kind of thing in a lot of cases.
You shut an awful lot out with that. And the other problem is as well then the subtleties of I've been on a course to talk to kids who've got Asperger's, and one of the things that we do as adults is try and be really polite to kids. So would you mind doing this? Please, could you do this? Would you like to come and do this, please? And the problem is when you offer Asperger's kids a question like that, would you like to come and clean your teeth? They sit in there and they go, no, I want to carry on watching the telly. So then 10 minutes later, you're shouting at them saying, why haven't you come and done what I've asked you to do? And they've gone, well, you gave me a choice and I wanted to carry on watching the telly. So what do you mean I gave you a choice? You said, do you want to come and clean your teeth, please? No, I don't. And they are that literal. That you have to phrase things and you have to tell them when things are coming up. You have to tell them when situations are going to change. I did a lot of rugby coaching. It's like, okay, we're going to do this drill 3 more times and then we're going to go on to another drill, because if they actually loved that drill, then when you pulled them away and started another drill without any warning, they would just go ape shit.
Interesting.
There's a lot more to it than that. I'm not suggesting that was the Wikipedia page on Asperger's, but
no, but
it's an element of it.
Yeah, and if you've had some experience with it, then that's much more than I've had, and probably a lot of people had. Is Tam a hero in this one, Ewan, or is he a victim, or did he get? It seems that he got what he wanted, but I can't decide how I feel about the resolution of the episode.
Well, I think that's one of the things that that really hit home with me, because at the start of the episode, I think you kind of look at him, and maybe this is where I think he probably actually did act the part really, really well, was that you start off and you don't really like the guy. He comes through as arrogant. He comes through as someone that is very truculent, that you can't break down, that you've got no interest in feeling any emotion for whatsoever. And then by the end of the episode, you're kind of seeing that, he's at peace. The voices have stopped. It's all coming to an end. I'm with somewhere and I'm in a place where I can feel safe and protected and I can be who I am without all of that cacophony going on around me. And there was an empathy there between Tin Man and Tam, because of the fact that Tin Man wanted it all to end because he lost the ability to see anyone he got no crew anymore because of the radiation leak, and he got no one to bond with. He'd not seen anyone of his own kind. He was extinct, effectively, and that's why he'd gone to the star to finish it all. And I think it was a cry for help to a certain degree.
It's an interesting comparison. You have Tam, who is surrounded by the cacophony of human minds, and he craves that isolation. And over on the other side, you have Tin Man, who is completely isolated, completely alone, and seem to be craving some kind of company or some contact with another being of, I guess, of like capabilities.
I think the story had a strong undertone of depression in it as well. So, the Tin Man character was very much at the very end of a depressing period in its life, and it was like, okay, I'm going to choose the manner of my own demise by going and sitting and watching a star explode. And about the same time, I lost a mate to suicide. So this episode was kind of timed round about exactly when it happened. And he'd gone, he wasn't a really close friend. He was someone I'd played sport with. But he came to my house to a party, and he was the life and soul of the place on the Sunday night. Stayed over, got up early and left on Monday. And Monday night he was found in his car, and he'd taken his own life. Ironically, though, he'd parked himself outside a doctor's surgery. So I don't know how much of that was just a cry. And that was the thing that appealed to me about this episode, was that Gomtu's at the depths of depression, if you like, and then wants to see an end to it. And actually the end that he gets is a plea for help that Tam responds to. So Tam's his saviour at the end of it. And it was a good way to end the episode, I thought, because they clearly went off and had their adventures. I'm surprised that there wasn't another reference to him later in series, because I think that was one of the things that Star Trek really did. There was quite a few where it came back and it revisited old stories, like the Sherlock Holmes one with Moriarty and that kind of thing. I thought that Tin Man might come again, but maybe because this episode did get quite a lot of criticism, I think a little bit unfairly. Maybe that's why it didn't show again, because of the fact that it was seen as a weak episode.
First of all, thanks for sharing that. Second, I'm sure someone out there can tell us if Tam and Gumtu ever showed up in any of the novels.
Oh, I was saying that. I'm just thinking. I'm sure there's going to be emails.
Yeah, somebody probably has written a follow up to that. But third, that's really fascinating. I had not even thought about this as a quote unquote suicide message kind of episode, and you're absolutely right, and I can understand why it hit you the way it did. But
it was timing. It was just, I wouldn't have seen it otherwise if it hadn't been for that time.
Yeah, because I've lost some friends to suicide as well, and there's this weird thing that happens to you as the one left behind. That why didn't they come and talk to me, or why didn't they talk to somebody? And they made a choice. And, I don't feel like there was anything that I didn't do that I should have, but you still have this weird kind of guilt over it.
I think there's a certain element of it. I've got a friend who works for a charity here in the Midlands, and she, the charity is about going and see old people. So once a week she goes and she sees an old person. And it's an old person at random. It's not a regular person that she sees, and just goes and has a cup of tea with them and says, how you doing, and that kind of stuff. And they know that they're coming because they're signed up to the charity. And I think there's a certain element of that is part, kind of an empathy that comes through from Gomtu as well within it.
Interesting. I've never heard of that kind of engagement with seniors here in the U.S. Maybe it is there, but usually it's a more relationship based kind of thing.
Well, I think my uncle died when I was only 15, and my aunt didn't die until she was 93. So she ended it with 1/3 of her entire life she'd been on her own, and she sat in the house most of the day, and she got calls, people saying you all right, but then face-to-face contact with someone. I'd make sure I went out to see her once a week and have a cup of tea with her. But that was probably only in the last 2 years of her life, really. Just because, when you're younger, you're taking it with kids, you're taking it with grandkids, you're taking it with work. And if you're older and you lose your partner, then you might not see anyone for a month, quite literally.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. God, there was a lot there apparently, and you're helping me see it, and I hope you're helping some others see it. There's a lot more to this episode than maybe meets the eye at first viewing.
Yeah, I thought it was parallels, and like I said, the AI thing about how Star Trek constantly came up with this idea of things that were inanimate that actually alive, and defining whether it was alive or it wasn't alive, and that was always something that really interested me in the series. And it's probably done that from the original series right the way through to Discovery, which is awful. But I think that's one of the challenges, I think, of Star Trek, that where it is good. And I do like Star Trek a lot more than I like Star Wars, because it is about us. It's about the planet Earth, and it is about our potential futures and what we want to see from it. And there's a lot more aspiration in it as well than there is in Star Wars for me. And that's where I think Discovery kind of let itself down a bit, because it got less aspirational.
Okay. I'm waiting to we are very good at judging Next Gen, the original series, DS9, Voyager, because we've had such a long perspective on those. I think it will be interesting to see what happens to Discovery in 10, 15 years. How it is viewed in the Star Trek universe. I'm enjoying it. Because I think it's about overcoming obstacles and solving problems, and it's a whole different kind of thing that is not necessarily it's not as much commentary, I think, on current events as some episodes have been of some of the other series, but I'm still enjoying it. But hey, each to their own. Each to their own.
I never took to it. I didn't enjoy it. It did things that Star Trek's never done before. It was a lot more violence based. They've never had long story arcs like that had resolutions that were about going into the next series, and the story arc went into the next series as well. You had an arc that would go over across, last series, last series, last episode, next series, first episode. That's fine. To kind of keep you watching, but I just didn't enjoy the huge story arc of it. And they started off to do the segmented storylines, and then they stopped and they went back to the long story arc, and it just got boring for me. I just cannot. It was so alien to me as Star Trek. It just didn't. It was nothing like any of the previous Star Treks I'd seen.
And that's something that has kind of come across here as I've done these shows with friends, that Star Trek means something very specific to you and to everyone else that I've talked to, and to me. But what that is can vary so much. And it fascinates me. Sometimes it's the quick resolution that, okay, this terrible thing happened, but it's all going to be good by the end of the episode, or maybe 2 episodes from now. It's the story arcs. It's the individual characters and what they meant to someone in their life at a particular point. It really is a mirror that everybody kind of holds up to themselves. And I don't mean to be overstating it, because I'm sure there are other shows that are like that. But there's something special about Star Trek that seems to have this effect on people.
I think you're absolutely right, and I think that's what makes it special over Star Wars for me. I see Star Trek as far more about us, about holding up the mirror about what could be in the future. And that's where I think Discovery kind of lost it a bit. It didn't do that anymore. It didn't have the moral tales. It didn't have the undercurrents of the politics and the human interaction and the empathy. It just kind of was a war story, which we don't need. That's where I've really struggled with it. But yeah, totally. I totally get it's personal.
I do have to ask you, did Star Trek as a whole influence your career? I mean, you do audio, you do video, you do photography. You obviously do some production at different levels. Witness what's going on behind you.
Well, yeah, I bought a spaceship, you see, so...
Yeah. But beyond buying the spaceship, I mean, were you one of those kids that say, hey, I want to know how that's done and go and figure it out?
I was a child of Apollo as well, so I think the whole space thing was something that kind of gripped me massively. I got really, really vague memories of Armstrong and Aldrin. That period when I was a kid, my parents used to have a plastic sack that had newspapers from the day, and they had Life magazine and Time magazine in there that were gathered up, and I think they're still at my parents' house for in the loft or something like that in the attic. So, but I remember witnessing launches, and I would have been old enough for the last couple of launches to have witnessed them. And there was always stories about it. And Apollo 13 was gripping, and then I saw shuttle fly. So the first shuttle with Crippen and Young was really gathered my imagination, and I had the Airfix kit, to polycell kit to make together. So it was a massive. Space has always been something that I've really enjoyed, and has been the kind of boy's own example of it. And Star Trek kind of just kept feeding that from the sidelines. It was like, I know we're not there yet, but I can clearly see we're getting there. So Star Trek is gripping storylines of the future. Okay, we're maybe not as far on as we thought we would be, but and I think we've gone backwards in space terms as well. But I still enjoy. I still watch NASA TV. Just you're looking at Elon Musk's two rockets landing simultaneously, and coming to a stop and sitting down. You're kind of like, wow, that is so incredible to think that we've worked out how to do that. And technology does that for me a lot. It's like, okay, I'm never going to use that, but I appreciate how technologically brilliant that is.
Boy, you just said a mouthful there. You're never going to use it, but you appreciate it. And I'm the same way. When you saw those two rockets coming down, you got chills. And if you didn't get chills, folks, then you probably shouldn't be watching this program. Because
I was shouting. I was sat here. I was sat at this very desk looking at this monitor, and I put my arms up in the air and was going, "Whoa!"
Yep.
It was just incredible.
I know. It's and I almost feel sorry for folks that don't get that thrill out of that kind of thing. The ones that say, well, we could have spent that money, doing this or doing that on Earth. And it's like, no, God, you're missing the point. You're absolutely missing the point.
Yeah, no, definitely.
So, thank you for sharing all of this. I mean, obviously there's some very
I've really loved it,
things
mate.
in there. Yeah, I really appreciate it. I want you to definitely come back again and do another.
I was going to say, when you run out of guests, I'll come back with another episode.
No, I'm not. No, you're going to come back long before that, my friend. Until you do, where else can they find you? What else do you do, or where are you on social media?
I'm a photographer based in Birmingham. I do photo and video work, and you can look at me at rankin.photography as a website. I've also got a website. I've also got a YouTube page, 12 Space Media, as well, which you can look at some of the stuff that I've done. And BTN. So this has taken a big part of my life for the last 11 years, and that's how I met you and how I met so many great friends that I have now across the world. The British Tech Network, we do tech podcasting. We have a Mac show. We have a big tech show as well, which is everything that's not Apple. We've got a show called Crack at the Rootless, which is about from a lady who owns a novelty pub. We've got a daily show that's done by Carl out in the Philippines, and I've met some stunning people in the 11 years that I've been doing it. And I wouldn't change it for the world.
And I count you as one of the ones that I've met because of doing my other show, and just really amazing people that it's a pleasure to know. Thank you so much for being here.
Pleasure, man.
We'll do it again.
Oh yes.
Next time, maybe I'll let you put me.
I'll get your face up here next time.
Yeah, we'll see. We'll talk about it. Folks, I'm Chuck Joyner. This is Trek Favorites. If you have thoughts about this episode or Star Trek in general, drop me an email, chuck@trekfavorites.com. You can post something to our Facebook page. You can reach us at Trek Favorites on Twitter. And you can see the video version of this so you know what you and I were talking about, both on the website and also on our YouTube channel. Until the next time, thanks for joining us. Visit TrekFavorites.com to access all our shows. Watch the video versions on our YouTube channel and connect with us on Twitter and Facebook as @TrekFavorites.